When 12-year-old Jamal was humiliated in first class, he never imagined the stranger who defended him would become his father's greatest enemy, or the woman who'd teach him that love conquers even the deepest wounds. The leather seat felt like heaven beneath Jamal's small frame as he carefully buckled his seatbelt, trying not to wrinkle his new school uniform. At 12 years old, this was his first time in first class, and he wanted to savor every moment. His grandmother had saved for months to afford this ticket, a surprise for his acceptance into the prestigious Whitmore Academy. "Excuse me, young man." The flight attendant's voice cut through his wonder like ice. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." Ready for the complete story? Smash that subscribe button and tell me where you are tuning in from in the comments. Tomorrow brings another mind-blowing story that's just as unbelievable. Trust me, you will want to be here for it. Alright, let's jump into it. Jamal looked up, confused. The woman, her name tag read Patricia, stood with arms crossed, her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her disapproving expression. "Of course," he said politely, fumbling for the crumpled paper in his backpack. Patricia snatched it from his hands, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. Behind him, Jamal heard whispers starting among the other passengers. "This can't be right," Patricia announced loudly enough for half the cabin to hear. "There must be some mistake." Just as Patricia was about to escort Jamal out, a warm voice interrupted from across the aisle. "Actually, there's no mistake." A woman with kind brown eyes and salt and pepper hair leaned forward. She was elegantly dressed, but had an approachable demeanor. "I saw him check in at the gate. That's definitely his seat." Patricia's face flushed red. "Ma'am, I need to verify." "What you need to do is treat this young man with the same respect you'd show any other first-class passenger," the woman said firmly, her voice carrying an authority that made Patricia step back. The woman extended her hand to Jamal with a warm smile. "I'm Victoria Montgomery. And you are?" "Jamal Williams," he replied, still shaken but grateful for her intervention. As Victoria and Jamal talked during takeoff, something magical happened. She didn't speak to him like he was just a kid. She listened when he talked about his dreams of becoming an engineer, his nervousness about starting at a new school, how his grandmother worked 3 jobs to give him opportunities. "Your grandmother sounds like an extraordinary woman," Victoria said softly. "She is. She says education is the one thing nobody can take away from you." Jamal's eyes lit up. "She always tells me, 'Baby, your daddy might not be here, but you've got everything you need inside you to succeed.'" Victoria's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Your father, he's not in your life?" "Never met him. Grandma says he was young and scared when I was born. She doesn't talk about him much, except to say he came for money." Jamal shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Doesn't matter though. Me and Grandma, we're a team." Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she reached into her purse. "Jamal, what's your last name again?" "Williams. Jamal Marcus Williams." The color drained from Victoria's face. She stared at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Shock, recognition, something deeper. "Is everything okay, Mrs. Montgomery?" Before Victoria could answer, Patricia reappeared with the captain, a stern-looking man who clearly hadn't wanted to be bothered. "Son," the captain said in a patronizing tone, "we've had some complaints about your presence in first class. Now, I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding, but for the comfort of our other passengers." "What complaints?" Victoria's voice was deadly quiet. The captain gestured vaguely. "Some passengers feel uncomfortable. Given the boys' background. Victoria stood up, and suddenly the entire energy of the cabin shifted. When she spoke, her voice carried a steel that made everyone within earshot go silent. Captain Rodriguez, I am Victoria Montgomery, Chief Legal Counsel for Montgomery Industries. That young man, she pointed to Jamal, has every right to be in that seat. If you remove him based on passenger discomfort with his race, you will find yourself in federal court before this plane reaches the ground. Are we clear? The captain's face went white. Montgomery Industries. Everyone knew that name. One of the largest conglomerates on the East Coast. Ma'am, there must be a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is thinking you can discriminate against a child on my watch. Victoria's eyes blazed. Now, I suggest you return to the cockpit and ensure we have a smooth flight. Jamal will be staying exactly where he is. As the captain retreated, the entire first-class cabin buzzed with whispers. Patricia had disappeared entirely. Victoria sat back down, her hands visibly shaking now. She looked at Jamal with an expression so intense it almost frightened him. Jamal, I need to ask you something very important. Your grandmother, what's her name? Rose Williams. But everyone calls her Nana Rose. Victoria closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were filled with tears. And your mother? Keisha Williams. She died when I was 2. Car accident. Jamal's voice grew quiet. Why are you asking me all this? Victoria reached into her purse again, pulling out a photograph. With trembling hands, she showed it to Jamal. It was a picture of a young black woman with bright eyes and a radiant smile. Is this your mother? Jamal's breath caught. How do you have this picture? Because, Victoria whispered, tears flowing freely now, I was supposed to be your grandmother too. The words hit Jamal like a physical blow. He stared at this woman, this stranger who had defended him, who had shown him kindness, trying to process what she just said. I don't understand. Victoria's voice broke as she continued. My son was dating your mother 13 years ago. When she got pregnant, he panicked. He was only 19, about to start his senior year at Harvard. I was so angry about the situation, so worried about his future. She covered her face with her hands. I told him if he acknowledged that baby, if he acknowledged you, I'd cut him off completely. Jamal felt like the airplane was spinning. You're saying, your son is my father? Yes, sweetheart. And I have spent every single day of the last 12 years regretting the choice I forced him to make. Victoria looked at him with eyes full of pain and love. I've thought about you constantly. Wondered if you were okay, if you were happy, if you needed anything. But you never came looking. I tried. But your grandmother. Victoria smiled through her tears. Rose Williams is a formidable woman. She made it very clear that you were her family now, and that we had made our choice. She was protecting you from people who had already hurt you once. Jamal sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb this revelation. Finally he spoke, his young voice carrying a wisdom beyond his years. So what happens now? You found me by accident on this airplane. Does that change anything? Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, and saw herself in his eyes, saw her son in the set of his jaw, saw strength that reminded her of Rose Williams. I don't know, sweetheart. But I know this, meeting you today, defending you today, it's the most right I've felt in 12 years. She reached out tentatively, and when Jamal didn't pull away, she took his hand. "Your grandmother was right to protect you from us. But maybe it's time we proved we deserve a chance to be your family too." As the plane began its descent, neither Victoria nor Jamal knew that this chance encounter would set in motion events that would transform not just their lives, but the life of the man who had been carrying the weight of abandoning his son for over a decade. In just a few hours, Jamal would discover that sometimes the family you've been missing finds you in the most unexpected places, and that love, even when it comes late, can heal wounds that seemed impossible to mend. The baggage claim area of Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport buzzed with its usual chaos, but Jamal felt like he was moving through a dream. Victoria walked beside him, having insisted on accompanying him until his ride arrived. They had exchanged phone numbers, and she'd already texted her son, Jamal's father, though she hadn't told him why yet. "There's my Nana." Jamal pointed to a woman standing near the exit, her silver hair pulled back, wearing her church dress despite the early hour. Even from a distance, Rose Williams commanded attention, her posture straight, her expression alert. Victoria stopped walking. I should probably go." "No." Jamal's voice was firm. "She needs to see you. She needs to know what happened today." Rose Williams spotted her grandson and began walking toward them, her keen eyes immediately assessing the well-dressed woman beside him. As she got closer, recognition dawned on her face, and her steps slowed. "Well, I'll be damned," Rose said quietly when she reached them. "Victoria Montgomery." "Hello, Rose." Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. The two women stared at each other, 13 years of pain, regret, and protective love hanging between them like a thick curtain. "Nana," Jamal said carefully, "Mrs. Montgomery helped me on the plane. They tried to kick me out of first class." Rose's expression immediately shifted to fierce protectiveness. "They what?" Victoria stepped forward. "It's handled. But Rose, we need to talk. All of us." Before Rose could respond, a commotion erupted near the baggage carousels. Raised voices, the sound of something crashing to the floor. All three turned to see a young black man in an expensive suit arguing with airport security. "I don't care what your policy is," the man was saying, his voice carrying across the space. "My son was on that flight, and if anything happened to him..." Jamal's breath caught. Even though he'd never seen him before, something in the man's voice, his gestures, the way he held himself, felt familiar. Victoria's face went white. "Oh my God. Marcus." "That's my daddy?" Jamal whispered. The man, Marcus Montgomery, was showing something to the security guards, gesturing frantically toward the arrival gates. Even from a distance, they could see he was agitated, desperate. "He came," Victoria breathed. "I texted him that I'd found you, and he came." Rose Williams stood frozen, watching the man who had abandoned her grandson, now frantically searching for him. 13 years, she said quietly. 13 years, and now he shows up. Marcus Montgomery was 32 now, but in that moment, searching desperately for a son he'd never met, he looked like the scared 19-year-old boy he'd been when Keisha told him she was pregnant. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his tie askew, his hair mussed from running his hands through it. "Marcus!" Victoria called out. He spun around, relief flooding his face when he saw his mother. But when his eyes landed on the small boy beside her, the world seemed to stop. Jamal stood perfectly still, studying his father's face. They had the same eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same way of standing with their shoulders squared when facing something difficult. "Jesus," Marcus whispered, taking a tentative step forward. "You look just like her." "You mean my mother," Jamal said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Marcus's voice cracked. "You look just like Keisha." Rose Williams stepped protectively closer to her grandson. "And what exactly are you doing here, Marcus Montgomery?" Marcus's eyes met Rose's, and the years of guilt and regret crashed over him like a wave. "Mrs. Williams, when my mother texted me that she'd found Jamal, that he was in trouble, I had to come." "Had to." Rose's voice was sharp. Interesting choice of words from a man who had to disappear when his son needed him most. The tension in the space was palpable. Other travelers were starting to stare, sensing the drama unfolding. Marcus looked between his mother, Rose, and Jamal, his hands shaking. "You're right," he said suddenly, his voice carrying across the baggage claim area. "You're absolutely right. I was a coward. I was 19 years old, and I was terrified, and I made the worst decision of my life." Jamal stepped forward, his young voice cutting through the adult emotions swirling around him. "Why are you here now?" Marcus knelt down so he was at eye level with his son. "Because for 13 years, not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you. Not a day that I haven't wondered if you were okay, if you were happy, if you needed anything. But you never came." "No. I never came." Marcus's honesty was stark, painful. "At first, because I was young and stupid and scared. Later, because I was ashamed. And then because I figured you were better off without someone who had already failed you once." Jamal looked at this man, his father, and said something that stunned all the adults around him. "Are you married?" The question hung in the air. Marcus looked confused by the change of subject. "No, son. I'm not." "Do you have other kids?" "No." "Do you love anyone?" Marcus's face went through a series of emotions. That's complicated." "No, it's not," Jamal said with 12-year-old directness. "Either you love someone or you don't." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was so soft they had to strain to hear him. "I loved your mother. More than I knew how to handle at 19. And I've been afraid to love anyone that much ever since." Victoria wiped tears from her eyes. Rose Williams watched this exchange with an expression that was slowly shifting from protective anger to something else. "Mrs. Williams," Marcus said, standing but keeping his eyes on Rose, "I know I have no right to ask for anything. But could I take you both to dinner? I know 13 years is a long time to make up for, but I'd like to try." Rose Williams looked at this man who had caused her family so much pain, who had left her daughter to raise a child alone, who had broken her grandson's heart before he was even old enough to know he had one. Every instinct told her to say no, to protect Jamal from further disappointment. But then she looked at her grandson's face. Despite everything, despite 13 years of absence, there was hope in Jamal's eyes. Hope and curiosity, and the kind of courage that had gotten him this far in life. "One dinner," Rose said finally. "But we choose the place. And if you hurt him again—" "I won't," Marcus said quickly. "I swear to you, Mrs. Williams, I won't." Victoria stepped forward. "There's something else you all should know. Marcus, the reason Jamal was in first class today, he's been accepted to Whitmore Academy." Marcus's eyes widened. Whitmore was one of the most prestigious preparatory schools in the country. That's incredible. Congratulations, Jamal. Thank you. Jamal's response was polite but cautious. Nana saved up for months to buy me that plane ticket. It was supposed to be a celebration. The weight of that statement, the sacrifice it represented, the years of struggle it implied, hit Marcus like a physical blow. His son had needed so much, and Marcus had provided nothing. "Mrs. Williams," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "what can I do? How can I help? The tuition at Whitmore, living expenses, anything Jamal needs." "We don't need your money," Rose said sharply. "But I want to help. I want to be part of his life, if he'll let me." Have you ever had to decide whether to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? What factors would influence your decision? Share your thoughts. Is there a point where it's too late for second chances? They decided on a small soul food restaurant in downtown Atlanta, the kind of place where Rose felt comfortable and Marcus would be completely out of his element. As they settled into a booth, the awkwardness was almost tangible. "So," Jamal said, cutting through the silence with characteristic directness, "tell me about yourself. What do you do? What do you like? Do you have any hobbies?" Marcus smiled at his son's businesslike approach to getting to know his absent father. "I run a tech company. We develop educational software for underserved communities. I like jazz music, terrible action movies, and I collect vintage comic books." "You collect comic books?" For the first time since they'd met, Jamal's reserved demeanor cracked, revealing genuine interest. "Amazing Spider-Man #1, X-Men #1, Batman #1, Marcus rattled off. "I have a whole room dedicated to them." "That's so cool. I love Spider-Man. Nana got me a subscription for my birthday." Rose watched this exchange with mixed emotions. She could see her grandson lighting up, connecting with his father over something simple and innocent. But she also remembered 13 years of nights when Jamal had asked about his daddy, and she'd had no answers. As they talked, a young woman approached their table. She was beautiful, professionally dressed, with warm brown eyes and a nervous smile. "Marcus? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I saw you from across the restaurant." She paused, looking uncertain. Marcus looked up, and his face immediately softened. "Elena, what are you doing here?" "Business dinner with a client. I was just leaving when I spotted you." Her eyes moved to Jamal, Victoria, and Rose, clearly wondering about this unusual group. "Elena, I'd like you to meet some very important people." Marcus's voice carried a warmth they hadn't heard before. "This is my mother, Victoria, Mrs. Rose Williams, and—" He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "This is my son, Jamal." Elena's eyes widened in surprise, but her smile never wavered. She extended her hand to Jamal. "It's wonderful to meet you, Jamal. Your father talks about you all the time." "He does." Jamal looked confused. Marcus's face flushed. She's very special to me. She's been trying to convince me for 2 years to find you, to try to make things right." Elena knelt down beside Jamal's chair. "Your father carries a picture of your mother in his wallet. He's shown it to me probably 100 times, telling me how much you must look like her, wondering what kind of person you're growing up to be." Rose Williams leaned forward, studying this woman who seemed to know things about Marcus that even his own mother didn't know. "How long have you two been together?" Rose asked. Elena looked at Marcus, a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly. 2.5 years. But Marcus has always said he couldn't fully commit to anyone until he'd made peace with his past. Until he'd found a way to be the father he should have been from the beginning. The revelation hung in the air. Marcus had been carrying the weight of abandoning Jamal for over a decade, and it had affected every relationship he'd tried to build since. "Is that why you never got married?" Jamal asked with startling perceptiveness. Marcus looked at his son, this wise, brave boy who had every reason to hate him but was instead trying to understand him, and felt his heart break and heal at the same time. "Yes," he said simply. "How could I promise to love someone forever when I'd already proven I was capable of walking away from the people I loved most?" Elena reached over and took Marcus's hand, squeezing it gently. "But that was then. You were a teenager who made a mistake. You're not that person anymore." Victoria watched this exchange with growing understanding. Her son hadn't just been carrying guilt about abandoning Jamal. He'd been punishing himself, denying himself love and happiness because he felt he didn't deserve it. "Marcus," Victoria said softly, "you can't undo the past 13 years. But you can decide what the next 13 years look like." Rose Williams, who had been quietly observing this woman Elena, finally spoke. "Miss, what do you do for work?" "I'm a social worker. I specialize in family reunification, helping families that have been separated find their way back to each other." The irony wasn't lost on anyone at the table. Marcus had fallen in love with someone whose life's work was bringing families back together, and she'd been encouraging him to do exactly that with his own son. "Well," Rose said, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, "seems like you found yourself a good woman, Marcus Montgomery. Question is, what are you gonna do about it?" 3 days later, Jamal sat in the living room of his grandmother's modest Atlanta home, staring at the business card Marcus had given him. Montgomery Tech Solutions, Marcus Montgomery, CEO. He'd looked up the company online and been shocked to discover his father wasn't just successful, he was worth millions. The front door opened, and Rose walked in carrying grocery bags, followed by an unexpected visitor. "Jamal, baby, look who stopped by," Rose said, though her tone suggested this wasn't entirely a surprise. Elena Martinez stood in the doorway, holding a small wrapped package and wearing a nervous smile. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I brought you something." Jamal set down the business card and accepted the gift. Inside was a first edition of the Amazing Spider-Man comic, pristine condition, clearly valuable. "This is too much," Jamal said, though his eyes lit up as he carefully examined the comic. "Actually, it's from your father. He wanted to give it to you himself, but—" Elena sat down across from him. "He's terrified, Jamal. Terrified of saying the wrong thing, of pushing too hard, of messing this up." Rose Williams bustled around the kitchen, but Jamal could tell she was listening to every word. "Can I tell you something about Marcus?" Elena continued. "For 2 years, I've watched him build schools in underserved communities, fund scholarship programs, mentor young entrepreneurs. Do you know why he does all of that?" Jamal shook his head. "Because he's trying to be the father he couldn't be to you, to hundreds of other kids. Every scholarship he funds, every mentorship program he creates, it's all him trying to make up for not being there for his own son." Elena pulled out her phone and showed Jamal a series of photos. "These are from last month. Your father opened a computer lab at a school in East Atlanta. Look at the sign." Jamal's breath caught. The bronze plaque read, "The Keisha Williams Memorial Computer Lab, in memory of a mother whose love continues to inspire. He named it after my mom. Every year on your birthday, He makes a donation to a charity in her name. He's never forgotten her, Jamal. And he's never stopped loving you, even from a distance. Rose Williams appeared in the doorway, tears in her eyes. Why didn't he tell us? Elena looked between them. Because he thought he didn't have the right. He thought that after abandoning you, he couldn't just buy his way back into your lives. Just then, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, they could see Marcus pacing on the front porch, clearly working up the courage to ring the bell again. He doesn't know I'm here, Elena whispered. I told him I was going shopping. Rose went to open the door, and Marcus nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw her. Mrs. Williams, I'm sorry to bother you, but I couldn't stop thinking about what Elena said yesterday, about how I need to stop being afraid of messing up and just be present. So I came to ask. He took a deep breath. Could I take Jamal to see Keisha? To visit her grave? I know I don't have the right to ask, but… Daddy. Marcus turned to see Jamal standing behind Rose, and the word hit him like a physical force. It was the first time Jamal had called him that. You want to visit Mama's grave with me? Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. Greenwood Cemetery was peaceful in the late afternoon light, with old oak trees casting long shadows across the headstones. Marcus walked beside Jamal, each carrying flowers, Marcus with white roses, Jamal with the bright sunflowers his mother had always loved. They stopped in front of a modest granite headstone. Keisha Marie Williams, beloved daughter and mother, her love lives on. I come here every month, Jamal said quietly, kneeling to place his sunflowers. I tell her about school, about Nana, about my dreams. Marcus knelt beside his son, placing the white roses next to the sunflowers. I've never been here before. I know. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Tell me about her, Jamal said suddenly. Tell me about my mama when you knew her. Marcus's face softened with memory. She was the most vibrant person I'd ever met. When Keisha walked into a room, everything got brighter. She had this laugh that was so infectious, you couldn't help but smile even if you didn't know what was funny. Nana says I have her laugh. You do. When you laughed at the restaurant, when I mentioned the comic books, it was exactly like hers. Marcus's voice grew thick with emotion. She was studying to be a teacher. Did you know that? She wanted to teach elementary school because she said little kids still believed in magic, and she wanted to help them hold on to that as long as possible. Jamal smiled. That sounds like something she'd say. When she told me she was pregnant, she wasn't scared or upset. She was excited. She started making plans immediately, how we'd balance school and parenting, what kind of life we'd build together. Marcus's voice broke. She believed we could do it. She believed in us. But you didn't. No, I didn't. I was terrified of being poor, of struggling, of not being able to provide for you both. My mother had drilled into me that success meant money and status, and I couldn't see how having a baby at 19 fit into that plan. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn envelope. After Keisha died, your grandmother sent me this. I've carried it ever since. Inside was a letter in Keisha's handwriting, dated just weeks before her death. My dearest Marcus, I know you're scared, and I know your family disapproves, but I need you to know something. Our son is going to be extraordinary. He already kicks like he's trying to run before he can even walk. He's going to be curious and brave and kind, just like his daddy was before the world made him afraid. If something happens to me, Promise me you'll find him someday. Promise me you'll tell him that his mama loved him enough for both of us, but that his daddy loved him too, even if he didn't know how to show it. Love, always K. Jamal read the letter twice, tears streaming down his face. She knew. Even then, she knew you loved me. She knew me better than I knew myself. Marcus wiped his own tears. Jamal, I can't change the past 13 years. I can't give you back the birthdays I missed, the bedtime stories I didn't read, the scraped knees I wasn't there to bandage. But if you'll let me, I want to be present for everything from now on. Jamal looked at his father, really looked at him, and saw not the successful CEO or the scared teenager he'd once been, but a man carrying 13 years of regret and love in equal measure. I'm scared too, Jamal admitted. What if I'm not what you expected? What if I disappoint you? Marcus turned to face his son fully. Jamal Marcus Williams, you could never disappoint me. In 3 days, you've shown more courage and wisdom than I had in my entire 20s. You stood up to discrimination on that airplane. You gave me a chance when you had every right to slam the door in my face. You're exactly the kind of man your mother knew you'd become. Will you tell me more about her? Not just the good stuff, but everything. Every story I can remember. And Mrs. Williams, your Nana, she has hundreds more. They sat by Keisha's grave until the sun began to set, Marcus sharing memories of their young love, Jamal asking questions about the mother he'd never known but always felt in his heart. Daddy, Jamal said as they prepared to leave. Yes, son. Elena loves you. Like, really loves you. Nana could tell, and I can tell too. Marcus looked surprised. What makes you say that? The way she looks at you. The way she talks about you when you're not around. The way she's been trying to get you to find me. Jamal stood and brushed dirt off his knees. Mama's been gone for 10 years. Don't you think she'd want you to be happy? 2 months later, the autumn leaves were just beginning to turn in Atlanta. Jamal had settled into life at Whitmore Academy, where he was thriving academically and had made several close friends. More importantly, he'd been spending weekends with Marcus, building the relationship they'd both missed for so many years. Tonight was special, though. Marcus had invited Elena, Jamal, and Rose to dinner at his penthouse apartment, the first time they'd all been together since that day at the restaurant. This place is incredible, Jamal said, pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. You can see everything from up here. Your father has good taste, Rose admitted grudgingly. Over the past 2 months, her opinion of Marcus had slowly begun to shift as she watched him consistently show up for his son. Elena emerged from the kitchen, having insisted on helping Marcus cook. Dinner's almost ready. Marcus is just putting the finishing touches on dessert. What's he making? Jamal asked. It's a surprise. Marcus appeared carrying a homemade cake, and Jamal's eyes widened. It was decorated to look like a comic book cover, complete with the amazing adventures of Jamal Williams written across the top. This is amazing. How did you? I may have called a professional baker friend for advice, Marcus admitted with a grin. But I decorated it myself. As they sat down to eat, the conversation flowed more naturally than it ever had before. Marcus told stories about his early days building his company, Elena shared funny anecdotes from her work, Rose regaled them with tales of Jamal's childhood antics, and Jamal talked excitedly about his classes and friends. Halfway through dinner, Marcus grew quiet. He kept glancing at Elena, who gave him encouraging nods. Actually, Marcus said, standing up suddenly, "there's something I need to say. Something I need to ask." He walked around the table to where Elena was sitting and, to everyone's surprise, dropped to one knee beside her chair. Elena's hands flew to her mouth, tears immediately springing to her eyes. "Elena Maria Martinez," Marcus said, his voice shaking with emotion, "2.5 years ago, you walked into my life and changed everything. You saw through all my fear and self-doubt to the man I could be. You encouraged me to find my son, to face my past, to believe I deserved love and happiness." He pulled out a ring box, and Elena began crying in earnest. "But more than that, you've shown me what real love looks like. It's not the desperate, scared love I felt at 19. It's patient and kind, and brave enough to push someone to be their best self." Marcus opened the ring box, revealing a stunning vintage engagement ring. "Jamal helped me pick this out," he said, glancing at his son, who was grinning widely. "He said you'd like something with history, something that had been loved before." "You knew about this?" Elena asked Jamal through her tears. "He asked for my permission first," Jamal said solemnly. "I told him yes, but only if he promised to make you as happy as you make him." Marcus looked back at Elena. "I can't promise I'll be a perfect husband, just like I can't promise I'll be a perfect father. But I can promise I'll show up, every day, for the rest of my life. Elena, will you marry me?" "Yes." Elena laughed through her tears. "Yes, of course, yes." The table erupted in celebration. Rose Williams was wiping her eyes with her napkin, muttering about fool men who finally get their sense, while Jamal hooped and cheered. As Marcus slipped the ring onto Elena's finger, she looked around the table at this unlikely family they'd all created together. "I have something to say too," Elena announced once everyone had settled down. "Marcus, when I first met you, I fell in love with your heart, even though it was broken. Jamal, over these past months, I've watched you give your father the kind of grace and forgiveness that most adults couldn't manage. And Mrs. Williams, you've shown me what it means to love someone enough to fight for them, even when they disappoint you." She paused, looking at each of them. "I want you all to know that I'm not trying to replace anyone or change anything. I just want to add to this family, if you'll have me. What do you think makes a real family? Is it blood, or is it the people who choose to love and support each other? Share your thoughts about how families can be formed in unexpected ways." Rose Williams stood up and walked around the table to Elena. For a moment, everyone held their breath, uncertain what the family matriarch would say. Then Rose wrapped Elena in a fierce hug. "Welcome to the family, baby girl," Rose whispered. "Welcome to the family." 1 year later. The wedding was small but perfect, held in the gardens of the community center where Marcus had built his first computer lab. Jamal walked Elena down the aisle. She'd asked him to give her away, saying he was the one who'd brought her the love of her life. Rose Williams cried through the entire ceremony, though she'd deny it if anyone asked. Victoria Montgomery, who had become a regular fixture in their lives, served as Elena's matron of honor. In his wedding speech, Marcus talked about how love had found him twice, first with Keisha, teaching him what it meant to love someone completely, and then with Elena, teaching him what it meant to love someone wisely. But the greatest love story of all, he said, looking at Jamal, is the one between a father and son who found each other when they both needed it most. "Jamal, you didn't just give me a second chance at being your dad. You gave me a second chance at believing I deserved to be loved." As the evening wound down, Jamal found himself standing with his father and Elena, watching Rose Williams teaching the electric slide to some of the younger wedding guests. "You know what the best part is?" Jamal said thoughtfully. "What's that, son?" "I used to think I was missing something because I didn't have a dad. But I wasn't missing anything. I was just waiting for the right time to find my family." He grinned at both of them. "All of my family." Elena squeezed his hand. "Your mama would be so proud of the young man you've become." "She'd be proud of all of us," Jamal said. "She'd say we finally figured out what she knew all along, that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when it's scary." Marcus looked at his son, his wife, his mother laughing with Rose Williams, and felt a peace he'd never known before. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with the bravest act of all, choosing to love, even when you don't know if you deserve to be loved back. In the end, that's exactly what they'd all done. They'd chosen each other, chosen forgiveness, chosen hope. They'd chosen love at last.